Is it recording now?
Okay, so I just wanted to share how we staff schools this year, which I know a lot of you have probably already received some of your allocations. So we did a lot of background work. I think I remember a few folks remember last time we met during the beginning of the school year, we did some type of root cause analysis to figure out what are some things that were causing some of the our data. And one of the things that was very, very clear in that root cause analysis that we did with teachers, we also did that with administrators, and also teaching and learning administrators, and staffing, and the staffing ratios were huge on that list. And so we decided to spend a couple months with our teaching and learning administrators and our business office folks to come up with a new way of allocating schools that would add more staffing to schools based on enrollment projections. And I know some of you are thinking, well, wait a minute, it looks like we are losing allocations. How is it that that we're gaining, or that we are putting more money into EL? So what we did was we changed, elementary schools were staffed on a 45-to-1 ratio for non-dual language schools. So we separated out the dual language schools and the non-dual language schools. We applied the 45-to-1 ratio for non-dual language schools to support co-teaching model. And then dual language schools were staffed at 45-to-1 for the non-dual language strand if they were a strand school, and then a 60-to-1, the higher ratio for the dual language strand. And the idea behind that is that dual language, as we know, is the best model for our multilingual learners, especially if dual language is provided in that language. And so we had, for the dual language strand, we gave a little bit higher ratio since a lot of students are receiving so much language support in that dual language strand. So if we have students that are ELs that are in that dual language strand, they're receiving so much support. And then secondary schools were staffed on a 60-to-1 ratio. And Andy, I know you help with this as well, so just chime in as well. We also wait for poverty and newcomers. At the secondary level, we used a 0.2 rounding. We also use projected enrollment, and we did not use actual enrollment numbers to allocate schools. So I know a lot of you are looking at your allocation, and then you're also looking at the number of students that you have currently. And just remember that when we staff schools, and this is not just for ELs, it's also for classroom teachers, the way that that we do this and we project enrollment is very similar to how our demographer projects for all the other classrooms. And the reason we use projected is that we have to look at trends for each of the schools and the communities. And sometimes that's not always, and sometimes it's not accurate, right? Because sometimes you might have a newcomer group come in and concentrate in certain communities, and that's kind of hard to predict. And so we would make adjustments at the beginning of the year if that's the case. And so after we did all of that for license, we did 40, plugged in the ratios. And after that was completed, based on projected enrollment and newcomer and poverty, we added an additional classified paraeducator 1 allocation to schools that had 0.5 and 1.0 allocations, so that there are at least 2 adults working with students. So we didn't, I just want to make it very, very clear that it wasn't this, let's replace our license with paraeducator or classified staff. We did all of the projected enrollment first, and we added paraeducators to support schools that have a 0.5 and 1.0 allocation. So that's kind of in a nutshell how we staffed schools. And I would just really, really encourage you all to check in with your administrators for specific staffing information, because we communicate often with our administrators. And just so you know, there was an error in the budget document that administrators received, and it was flipped with the dual language and the non-dual language schools. And so it looked like for non-dual language schools, it was a 60-to-1 ratio, and dual language for 45-to-1. But just know that was flipped, and it was corrected. It didn't impact staffing or anything, but we did incorrectly flip that. Thank you, Betsy.
You're welcome. There's a question in the chat. Do you want to take questions?
Trainings. We'll talk about professional development for paraeducators.
And will the schools with
minute allocations not follow the code? I don't understand that, but let's go into, maybe that will be addressed in our program model when we talk about models.
All right, I
Postings
think you're
for
up for
parents.
the.
Yeah.
So now we're going to talk about, or Toshiko's going to talk about the co-planning, our model for co-planning.
Yeah, and then this is what we shared with all of the administrators. And this has gone through so many different iterations already. And you know, the visual, we are trying to combine all of the different levels into a visual. So you can go on to the next slide to define kind of what we're expecting of all schools and all levels. And these first few slides, we are going to make sure that they are front and center in all of the PD modules that we're going to be creating and delivering, that everybody just knows what the model is and what our guidance is, because I think sometimes there's confusion. And so for every PD that we do, we're going to make sure that these first few slides are front and center. So back to the strategic plan, just making sure that we know that our program models are supposed to be designed to support the progress of our students. And so it does align with that pillar there, the progress on standards achievement for all. I mean, you could also attach it to the foundations of success when we talk about early literacy, but yeah, that's kind of where we landed on this one. So just take a moment right now to look at this visual here. I know we've looked at it so many times, and then we caught an error, a minor error, and so we just fixed that. But yeah, take a look at this visual. We are trying to clean up our language and make it very, very clear what our expectations are. And so I'll go through each one of them, and then we do have slides that that describe each of these levels. So focused, you know, we had, I think we had a term that we were using that we stole from New York's model. They call them standalone courses. And that was pretty confusing for a lot of people. Just know that this went through teaching and learning, this went through administrators, and we got feedback along the way. And so focused is a word that we came up with for focus support. It could be in a form of pullout, but not long-term. And we're saying that this course or this support should be for your newcomer students or students that are emerging ELPA level, and it could be K through 12. So we could have a focus support for our newcomer and emerging students. And then what we're saying is the two big models that we're saying is that we should have for our multilingual learners is co-teaching and dual language. I'll talk about co-teaching. We had this consulting as well, but we folded consulting into co-teaching, and I'll tell you more about that when we get to the definitions. So this co-teaching consulting is for all ELPA levels and K through 12. So this is also going to the high schools. The high schools already received this presentation, and so we're shifting high schools as well to more of integrated co-teaching model, and they're going to be following this guidance as well. Then we have dual language programs that also support our multilingual learners at all levels. And we put pre-K here because we do have pre-K programs that are dual language that will be starting this fall. And then dually endorsed teacher is another way to support our multilingual learners, and that's at all ELPA levels. And we're saying 6 through 12 elementary. I know that there are some elementary teachers that have or that are dually endorsed, but we're really strongly advocating for co-teaching at the elementary level. So that's our visual, and then we'll go into the different descriptions here. So if you go into the next slide. All right, so focused. We say students who meet both of these criteria, they have to be emerging proficiency level, and then newcomers in the US less than 1 year. And then we added here, we do have students in our newcomer program, and we give them a year, sometimes a year and a half in the program. But when they transition back to their home school, they really should still be in a focused support group. And so we say in the US, less than 1 year or 2 years if students came from a newcomer center. And for elementary, definitely temporary small group instruction when possible, and content is integrated, that they're not learning something totally separate. But it might be in the beginning of the year when they first are newcomers or students at the emerging level that we might need to teach them about how to navigate the school community. And we'll talk a bit more about the adoption, the language arts adoptions, and what supports there are for newcomer students that could be used during this time. In secondary, it's a separate class period. Content is connected to students' other coursework. And for the middle school folks that are here, we're having a lot of conversations around win time and what that could look like for students at the emerging level or newcomer students. Focus is also including our newcomer centers, which are specialized programs providing wraparound services for eligible ELs at specific sites. Okay, if you can go into the next slide, please. And co-teaching, a lot of you have some experience with this. Whether you have two teachers that co-plan, co-teach, co-assess, and co-reflect. So the ELD teacher is closely tied to a team of teachers and supporting the students in those classrooms. One is the ELD teacher that is typically the language expert, and the other is the classroom content teacher that is the content expert. Now, when we talk about the language arts adoption, I'm going to make it very clear that we're going to need both the classroom teachers to be language experts, and then the ELD teacher also to be content experts. And we're going to talk about professional development and how that will work. All right, so consulting. Consulting still has the original definition and guidance from previous years. The reason we folded it into the co-teaching is that we still want all of the elements and the components of the co-teaching to happen with consulting teachers. So if you have students that are in a consulting model, we want to make sure that there's co-planning that's happening with that teacher, and that we are also co-reflecting, co-assessing together. But the students and the teachers don't necessarily have to be, or the ELD teacher doesn't necessarily have to be co-teaching with these teachers that are in the consult model. And we say this model is typically primarily to support advanced students or students in specialized programs. If the student's schedule, if there's so much pullout, we want to make sure that there are opportunities for some of that consulting to happen so that it doesn't impact students so much. All right, so dual language, ELD language services align with the language allocation model. In DL strand schools, EL students not in DL are primarily served with a co-teaching model. In a DL school or strand, case management of ELs would still be the responsibility of the ELD teacher. But again, if in a DL school, there could be co-teaching with that ELD teacher in Spanish or on the English side. There could be consulting that might happen in dual language school. EL students participating in DL may need additional EL support, especially students at the emerging level. So if we have newcomers or students at the emerging level in a dual language strand or school-wide, they might still need additional support, especially in early literacy. All right, and then dual endorsed teacher, one teacher is endorsed in both ESOL and another content area. And we're including both the proficiency objectives, language proficiency objectives in their lessons, and assess progress towards meeting both content and language. Students earn both ELD and content credit. And then making sure that even though they're dually endorsed teachers, what we've seen at the secondary level, especially at high school level, is that even though they're dually endorsed, they spend a lot of teachers spend a lot of time in the content, but forget about incorporating those language-rich strategies. And so we just want to make sure that there's still that connection with the ELD teachers or the case managers, and that we're supporting and training our dually endorsed teachers to consistently incorporate language-rich strategies in their classrooms. Next slide, please. All right, so that is in a nutshell kind of the guidance. It's not necessarily new for elementary and middle school as it was for the high school folks. But we did want to share with you just our ideas for professional development and really chunking the PD. So we have modules that we are going to be creating for school leaders, as well as for classroom teachers and paraeducators. We need everybody well-versed in our model design. So if you can go back to the school leadership, just wanted to share with you the modules that we will be designing for school leaders. And initially we had these as year 1, year 2, year 3, but we put them as phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, because some of you have leaders that are already farther ahead with their understanding of co-teaching, have already been actually implementing this integrated model in their schools. And so they might not need the overview, but they might want to learn more about the learning walks that we will be doing, et cetera. So just know that this is fluid, and that these modules will be very, very short, maybe like 45 minutes to an hour. We're still trying to figure out dates of when we'll be able to provide this professional development. And then we also need to figure out if we're providing these asynchronously as well or synchronously. We still have to figure out all those little pieces for professional development. So just some titles here for the leaders. They will get some PD around school schedule building for co-teaching, clustering in our BSD-EL model. And just so you know, we are working with Dr. Andrea Hunningsfeld. She's been providing some technical assistance to your administrators, and they've been dropping in and receiving some coaching from Dr. Hunningsfeld on how to build a school schedule for co-teaching. And so it's anywhere from how to incorporate the ELD teacher into grade level teams, how to cluster and group students into those sections. So she's been doing a phenomenal job working with principals on the school schedules. And then the idea is that for each of these areas here, each of these modules, we will have a folder of resources as well as implementation success criteria. So we provide a lot of PD in our department, but what we want to make sure to measure is how is it actually impacting students, and what is our success criteria for that module and for that implementation. So an implementation success criteria for for school schedule, for example, could be, is there co-planning built into the schedule? That could be a huge implementation success criteria. And it should be, and we're going to design it so that it's short and that it is observable. And then for teachers and paraeducators, if you go on to the next slide here, it's more specific to the instructional practice. So, both of these will have an overview, which is module 1. And then module 2 is, for example, collaborative partnerships. If we're going to expect you to co-teach and to collaborate, the ELD teacher and the classroom teacher, well, we need to provide professional development on how to build that relationship and that collaborative partnership. And then we'll have videos of how current collaborative partnerships are successful. And then we'll have a link to a folder for resources. And again, implementation success criteria. So what does it look like to have an effective collaborative partnership in a co-teach model? What does collaborative planning, what is the implementation success criteria for collaborative planning? What should we see if we observe, or if your administrators observe collaborative planning? And then what is the success criteria for implementing the language-rich practices, collaborative co-teaching, et cetera. And then we are going to expect that paraeducators will also receive a lot of this training, and there will be some guidelines for how we will be supporting our paraeducators and supporting students. And Shoshana, I did mention earlier that the things that we have not figured out yet is the PD calendar, when this is going to be available, as well as if it's going to be asynchronous or synchronous. We have to figure out all that in person, etc. All right, if you can go to the next slide, please. All right, there are going to be various leadership shifts that we're going to be making this year. There's going to be a huge district shift to supporting Tier 1 instruction and making sure that Tier 1 instruction includes training for embedding language-rich practices across all content areas. And we're also going to be encouraging the use of home language as an anticipatory set. And we understand that incorporating language-rich strategies across all content areas, we want to make sure that teachers know it's not one more thing, but a lot of them are already doing some of the strategies, but we want to make sure that it's effective and that there's a huge focus on oracy as well. Okay, if you can go on to the next slide, please. We are going to include academic coaches. We've been hearing that they should also be included in the professional development. Next slide, please. Curriculum adoptions need to overlay English language proficiency standards, and there needs to be embedded supports for multilingual learners in all content areas. And so we'll share a bit about how this happened with our language arts adoption, which we're really excited about. But from now on, all curriculum adoptions will have, I will be at the table, one of our MOD rep will be at the table, making sure that we are doing this jointly with our content area adoptions, and to make sure that we embed those multilingual strategies. The way we're going to organize ourselves as far as TOSAs, it will be based on APU of the schools they are assigned to. So we'll have MLD support for like 0.5 and 1.0 schools, or 1.5 to 3.0 schools, etc. So that way the support could be very tailored to that school. District curriculum PD needs to be co-presented with lead team pairs or MLD TOSAs. So we'll be working on that. I think some of that happens already. MLD administrators and execs will be trained in how to do learning walks with building administrators to ensure implementation success criteria are met at several key points of the year that are planned in advance. And so we'll be planning all of the learning walks, and then we'll have all of the success criteria so that if we pop in and look and want to observe the implementation, we would be able to have some key points that we can look at throughout the year. We also will be working, we've already met with a couple of universities to partner to offer ESOL endorsements at a discounted rate to as many teachers as possible to build capacity. The duly endorsed model, even though we have that, we're still saying right now, until we can support all teachers and provide professional development, that the duly endorsed model should still be in addition to the ELD teacher allocation until we just have effective, until we build capacity throughout the system. I think that's all I have before we get to ALPA. I know there's a lot of questions in here in the chat. I know that some people are thinking, oh, the models and the co-teaching manuals are really focused on having 2 to 4 co-teachers. When we've met with Dr. Andrea Hunningsfeld with the smaller schools, like 0.5 schools and 1.0 schools, one of the things that we talked about was, and this happens throughout the country, is even if you have, because not all states have ELD teachers. In some states, the content teacher is the ELD teacher, and they're expected to embed those language-rich strategies. But for Oregon, we do have ELD teachers. And so one of the things we talked about was in small number schools like 0.5s or 1.0 is how do we build capacity with all teachers? And then maybe the ELD teacher is jumping in and co-teaching with newcomer students, but then also supporting and providing professional development to teachers. And then co-planning and making sure to co-plan with all the teams. And so that could also work as an idea for how to build capacity within the school with lower numbers of APU. Sorry, I think my time is up.
So Toshiko, do you want, there's a number of questions?
Yeah,
what we'll do
is, I tried to address some of them. But what we'll do is I'll keep tabs on them, and then we can add them to this document here, this program meeting document for this month, and then we can send that out.
Okay, great. All right, so our next topic is some ELPA information with Marco and Sana.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Hey, so sorry I don't have my video. The computer I have doesn't have a camera, unfortunately. But we did hear a lot of questions that came up about future kinder screening, and so we wanted to go over that. Some of you might already know that the kindergarten screening is opening up here starting in March. And there's actually 2 different screeners that happen for kindergarten. There's a future kinder screener and a normal kindergarten screener. There's been a lot of confusion since these proficiencies change depending on what screener is being applied, and different screeners are applied depending on where the student is at. So as a quick breakdown, we have the kindergarten ELPA screener. It opens in January and it closes in late July. This kindergarten student screener is specifically designed for students who are entering, who have already spent half the year within the district and are currently kindergartners looking to be first graders next year. These students would be proficient with 4s and 5s. The future kindergarten screener is designed to test students who are currently PKs and who will be kindergartners in the first 6 months of the year next year. And those are the ones that are scored normally during the summer. And those are very familiar to all of you. Those are the ones that have proficiencies of the 3-2-3-3 that happened last year. ODE has just sent out an update, I believe 2-3 weeks ago, that they fixed the cut scores. So now all proficiency levels will be at 3 for the future kindergarten screener. And that opens in March and closes a day after or before the kindergarten screener. Move on to the next slide, Betsy. And this is a little bit more of when you should apply each screener. So the first one is student has not yet begun kindergarten, their kindergarten year, or the student has begun their kindergarten year but is testing prior to the opening of the kindergarten screener. And the kindergarten screener window is in January, so that means that this future K screener is applied March through December 31st. And then the actual kindergarten screener, that one, if a student has begun their kindergarten year and the student is testing during the kindergarten screening period window. That one is from the beginning of July, beginning of January, all the way to the end of July. One thing about the kindergarten screener is that ODE tends to fluctuate the start times. They gave us a date of like the 7th, for example, this year, and then last minute they changed it to the 9th. I know last year, 22-23, I believe it was like the 5th or 6th. And so just a heads up, the actual kindergarten screener, that one fluctuates in January and it also fluctuates in July. But it's usually the first 2 weeks in January and the last 2 weeks of July. As a quick breakdown, I wrote down like an instance. So future kindergarten students who are those who are currently PKs and will be kindergarten beginning their first year of kinders in 24 and 25. All incoming kindergarten students when beginning the 24-25 school year are considered under the future kindergarten. So that means starting of next school year all the way to December, they'll be still testing under the future kindergarten. And they are the ones who will be proficient with scores with 3s. And then the normal kinder screener, so students who, let's say, were in a different state and then came to our state for the first time and enrolled in February and they're considered kindergarten, they would test under kindergarten screener. That one begins in January and those scores are proficient starting with 4s and 5s and going to 5s. I did link a document there of the updates that ODE sent out for the new cut scores with the future kindergarten screener being all 3s. And then if you go on to the next slide. This is the actual documentation that's found on the screener administration manual. This is all the breakdown. It's on there if you guys want to look it up on what the future K is and what the kindergarten screener is. Now, I do see some questions. I want to make sure I'm answering anybody's questions. Does anybody have questions? I know it's kind of confusing because I'm saying kindergarten a lot, but just think about it. Future K and kindergarten. Future K starts in March and goes all the way till December. Kindergarten goes from January to July. And they mesh in between in March. And so it all comes down to where the student is at currently, where they're going to be next year. Are they going to be kindergartners next year, or are they going to be first graders next year? And then you determine what screener is given during that time. One thing to note, if there's, for example, if a student tests under kindergarten screener, but they should have tested under pre-K, ODE has given us the go-ahead to be able to go ahead and categorize those students as pre-K and then assign the scores accordingly. So for example, if a student tests under kindergarten screener, but they should have been a PK and they come out all 3s with 1 4, then they would be considered proficient. Because we know for a fact that they're kindergartners, we would just have to add that in our notes section and be able to report that to ODE if they have a question.
Couple more questions.
All right.
In the chat now.
Classmates, so that's good. Not starting from 0 again, that's good news.
Let's see. How will you be notifying? So students will be notified after they get their screener through the normal notification process of they get the letter in the mail. If we get those letters back, like for some reason the address isn't working, we'll send those out directly to school so that schools can update the address or send it home with the kiddos. So it'll be the same process. Current, so a current student could be screened, and we'll put something else on now. Yes, technically they would be if they tested now in kindergarten, which I wouldn't. It is possible they can be screened now and then be placed in ELL services, but it would all depend on your school recommendation with your principals and whether the student should start this late in the year. I know a couple students at a couple schools have been turned down to start school right now because of how late we are in the year. But and when it comes to ODE expects a student who's tested to be placed in ELD services as soon as possible. So it would all come down to the communication between the parent and principal, or whether the student should enroll this year or next year. Trying to read all your questions. Let's see.
I think the next one is when will the future case screenings occur at our school? The end of the year?
So right now we're getting a tally of all our BF1s who would be willing to test during the summer, and we're hoping to get future kindergarten screening rocking and rolling next week on the 13th, and then on until through the summer. So we're thinking of ramping things up next week or the week after, and beginning to test all students in the district who are currently PKs. Again, that's all up to we sent out a survey, I believe last week, to find out how many BF1s would be willing to test during the summer. So we're trying to get that all done first before we go ahead and start our PK testing.
And then one more about kinder screening. Who will be administering the future kinder screeners? I think you kind of just addressed that.
Yeah, so all TAs who are currently TAs in the district, so that's our BF1s and teachers who have volunteered to be TAs, they'll be administering the future kindergarten screener. And then all the way up to the summer, right up to the summer, and then we have some volunteers that usually work during the summer to help test all into the new school year. So our BF1s who are assigned to their current schools, they will test at their current school if they're in an elementary school. And then if we have BF1s who are at high schools, for example, we will relocate them for a bit to elementary schools to test, because those numbers get huge, and so we need support. And so MLD coordinates with schools, BF1s on testing for screener testing during the summer and during these last couple months of the school year.
Thank you, Marco. Paige, I'm not ignoring you. There's a question about the newcomer program, Toshiko. It may be something we have to answer on the list of questions. Oh, and actually, Marco, Lynn was asking, do you want or need volunteers for screening?
Yes, if you guys are willing to volunteer for screening, that'd be super helpful. Just go ahead and send myself or Sana your information that you're wanting to test. Just bear in mind, if you're willing to test, it's great because it'll get your numbers in the books quicker, and then you'll have numbers quicker that way as well. And so it's an incentive to whoever wants to screen. Go ahead and just let us know, and we'll get you signed up with that. There is some reading training that you have to do, some PowerPoints that you have to go through according to ODE. But once we go through that and we get that TA form, you'll be rocking and rolling and good to go.
Okay, I think, Carol, how are we doing on time? Because there is one more question that looks like about kinder screener, and I know there was some questions about like filling out the language use survey. Do we have time, Carol?
I think we can get to Marco's questions. I think Toshiko's trying to answer some of the other ones that are based on programs. So if Marco can get to the other ones.
So this one from Sarah, Marco, why are we starting to screen kinder students who have additional languages in some part of the home language?
We'll get to that next screen.
Okay.
Next,
Thank you.
yeah.
Here we go.
Hi all, I'll be explaining where to find the additional language in Synergy. So in Synergy, when the LUS is recorded, the first language is recorded in the demographic, but the additional language will be recorded in the English language learners page. So, and you can find the English language learners page if you type English language learners in the quick launch. And then if you open that, the third tab will be the language use survey. So usually with the students who have more than one language recorded in the responses, the first language would be English, and the additional language would be other language. And so you see in the demographic page or in the student page, you will see only English. But if we can see that or find the additional language in the other page, which is the English language learners. We had guidance from ODE to go ahead and test those students with the additional language. And that's why we started the spring testing for the students who have additional language responses in their LUS. Yeah. Any questions?
Then to address some of the students that we are currently testing right now with this additional language. So we implemented the new language survey that that all districts have to use. And right now, what it did was when we looked at the additional language, which was not visible previously through Synergy, there were a lot of students that we had to test. But we wanted to wait until after the ELPA summative, because if we tested these kids, even though they had primary use language is English, first language is English, we would have to have them take the English or the ELPA summative as well. And so we already notified ODE. And so for a lot of these students, I think in a lot of schools, we're not seeing a lot of these students qualifying for services. So we've been having those conversations with individual schools, but from now on, just so you know, this is where you would be able to find the additional language in Synergy. We wanted to make sure to share that with you so that you are also aware that it's not just the language heard most, language use survey response, and language most used. It's also, we also have to look at that additional language. And this is statewide, it's not just an MLD thing.
All right, I'm going to go to the next topic. Thank you, Usana and Marco and Toshiko. Oh, and now we're going to talk about the new adoption with Marcela and Toshiko.
Hola, buenas tardes. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We are happy to share with you that last Tuesday, we presented to the board the recommendation from the Language Arts ELP Adoption Committee. And this recommendation was based on the different data collected by the committee, including community reviews, teacher reviews, the survey to pilot teachers, etc., and even own learnings from the committee, from the exploration of the different resources. And the committee took into consideration both curricula, benchmark, and how to Mifflin, and took also into consideration English instruction and dual language classrooms. So after careful analysis, the committee decided to recommend how to Mifflin Harcourt into reading and Arriba la Lectura for adoption to the school board. And this curriculum in this slide, you can see some of the key strengths from how to Mifflin. We would like to highlight that it is a curriculum that incorporates authentic voices that are reflected into high quality, culturally responsive texts that students can find outside of the BSD classrooms. So this gives the opportunity to the diverse community we serve to see themselves represented in the curriculum and also connect to the stories that they might find in their local library or somewhere else. Also, the curriculum has embedded scaffolds such as visuals attached to the vocabulary, for example, that are good for all learners, especially for multilingual learners. So we are excited because it has already scaffolds that will help us to differentiate in our instruction and that will address the needs of the multilingual learners we serve in BSD. For the next slide, Betsy, just briefly talk about, I would like to talk about Arriba la Lectura. With respect to Spanish, Arriba la Lectura incorporates more authentic methods for teaching Spanish, such as the syllabic method. And it is also a curriculum that was developed, at least the Spanish version, with dual language programs in mind. It offers connections between program languages, in this case, Spanish and English. So this is aligned to the most updated research in dual language education. So we are excited to have a curriculum with these characteristics in BSD. We haven't had something like this in the past in BSD. The first bilingual curriculum was the social sciences curriculum, but it didn't have all these components. It was not, it was customized and personalized, but it didn't have all the components that this curriculum has. So we are excited. It will be a good complement, and probably later on we can find more connections between social sciences and language arts. Both curriculums will be bilingual, and both of them are rich and incorporate authentic voices. So thank you so much for helping us in this process. If you were part of the pilot teachers or part of the committee, if you are part, thank you for your contributions.
Yeah, gracias, Marcela. And so as part of the language arts adoption as well, there are, and this is what we presented to the board last week, Tuesday, I believe, is that for HMH, there are multiple multilingual supports in teachers' guides, multilingual supports for in Tier 1 materials that provide focus support to newcomer students. And so we can go into the next slide, and I'll try to give some examples of this. And I try to take pictures of all the materials that I have and that I've been reviewing here in my office. And I just looked at took pictures of kindergarten here. And so classroom teachers will have access to all of these materials. Except for the language launch towards the end there. But I'll start with the English language development tabletop lessons. So for every grade level, there are tabletop mini lessons for reading in English, and then there's for all students, but then there's also one specific for for English language development. And it just gives you some examples that this could supplement what is being taught in core. And for each of these tabletop mini lessons for ELD, like this one here is like solve problems. It comes with strategies that teachers can implement and do like in little focus groups for maybe your newcomer students, or to even in the classroom in Tier 1, supporting students that might still need some support. But it breaks it down into domain level. So you have for reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And then there's also a collaborative problem solving section for each of these lessons, these mini lessons. For reading, all of the students will have these reading consumables. And as I'm looking through all of these pages to look for what could be the multilingual support, each of these lessons have multiple meaning words. And so they're learning trunk, for example, you can have students look at what are ways, different meanings for these words, but this is also an area where you can have them writing that word maybe, and showing them a visual of that word, or even writing the different words in different languages. And so it's a nice a way to support or scaffold for your multilingual learners. And then the one thing that is really, I'm really looking forward to is the structured literacy component of HMH, which through the adoption process, my understanding is that it was definitely stronger in this area. And for the structured literacy teacher's guide, there are scaffolds for multilingual learners. So for example, if we're doing phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency, vocabulary, phonics, for example, if they're learning about the consonant S, well, on the side, there's, okay, for multilingual learners, for Hmong speakers, for example, you might need to show them this articulation video or show them the visual of how they should be pronouncing that word. And the videos are also included in this resource. And then you go on to, in this lesson, you also have like small group instruction, which has differentiation of foundational skills for multilingual learners already embedded in there. And so this is something that if the whole class is doing structured literacy, it could be where for newcomers, we're pulling them aside and we're saying, okay, let's practice a little bit more on these foundational skills, etc. You can do small group instruction, or it could be co-taught as well. And then for tabletop mini lessons here, what I loved about the Spanish version, there's also a Spanish version of the mini lessons as well as the English. And when you look at both of them, they're pretty much in line. But the one thing that we liked about the HMH is that the translations were very, very authentic. Like, for example, when you're teaching author's purpose in the reading side, you know, the visual here that you see is it's easy as pie to remember, persuade, inform, entertain. Well, you can't really, in Spanish, we don't really translate, it's as easy as pie, or easy as pie doesn't really translate easily. And Marcela, you can agree with me, right? It's not really, there's not really a saying it's as easy as pie. Whereas in Spanish, you know, saying it's as easy as 1, 2, 3 is a little bit easier to you know, to translate, and it makes sense for native speakers. And so you see that the content is very similar, author's purpose and the way they translated it, but the visual is very, you know, is somewhat different, and it's very authentic to that language and that culture. And the only reason why I bring up the Spanish version is that even in the English side, I know there was a question here about, you know, home language support, but since we'll have in dual language schools, the lectura in Spanish, if you're in a strand school, you could pull this, the mini lesson in Spanish, especially if you have Spanish speakers on the English side, to scaffold learning for them, maybe, so that they're able to just learn the content side by side with the classroom teachers. And then Start Right readers, all of the kids have Start Right readers and decodable text. And the cool thing about the Start Right readers is that you can actually follow it along, and all the you can actually hear, the students would be able to hear the books being read. And then it also has a highlighter that follows and tracks as the book is being read. But there's that audio, and then there's also the reading and the tracking, which really, really helps our multilingual learners develop that initial literacy. And then for HMH, they do have this English 3D language launch. So there's English 3D for the upper grades. And that is more like it was designed for a pull-out class. However, for the lessons, you could actually pull lessons from there that tie into core and what they're learning, and use that as a way to support your multilingual learners. So if they're doing how to write a persuasive paper, for example, then you can look at the English 3D lesson, and it'll have scaffolds for multilingual learners. Then you would just pull that lesson out and use that with your multilingual learners. Like English 3D was a design for that pullout, which is very, very scripted, but you don't have to use it in that way. And then language launch can also be used for newcomers. And you know, the first unit, volume unit 2 is like getting to know you, or it's more around how to navigate the community, the school. So for your newcomers, this might be very, very valuable to use as they're learning how to navigate their community. I think that's my cue to move on.
I was like,
Thank you.
Thank you, Toshiko and Marcella. So we are going to get to go do a little breakout room. Give you a second to breathe. It's a lot of information. So what we're going to do is Ellie and I have been working, and actually Carol and Gloria have been working with a team of teachers working on coming up with some curriculum for newcomers that you can just use right away. So we had shared some of it with you before. We have a couple of more lessons to share with you. So we're going to go into breakout rooms. Carol, would you mind opening the breakout room? Really, we only need one breakout room. So middle school, we're going to go into a breakout room, and elementary, you're going to stay here. Both of the resources are here. So what elementary is getting is here, and this is what middle school will be getting. So you will get a chance to, I mean, you can look at what's on the one for the other grade level, or other, you know what I mean. Anyway, so how about middle school? We jump into the into a breakout room. I don't know if I have the option to make up a breakout room. Oh, okay, there we go. Oh, okay, there is one already. Thank you. Look, it looks like people are moving. Um,
I only see
have
one breakout
been-
room. I don't see breakout rooms either.
no?
I see
Where-
one room.
I can move somebody if you need to be moved. If you're middle school, you'll go to the breakout room. There's only one breakout room.
I see only one breakout room, yes.
There's only one.
Okay.
Yeah, elementary stays here in the main room.
Could somebody move me to the breakout room? I'm middle school, but I can't see any breakout rooms.
Yep, I'm moving now.
Oh, thank you.
Anybody else need to be moved?
All right. Again, let's see if I can share my screen. Just a second. I am putting in the chat. You can find it also in the main slides, but that is the link to the elementary newcomer resources that we But anyway, I just wanted to kind of show you my thinking around this and then kind of wanting to get your feedback if you end up using it. You don't have to. But basically what I wanted to do two things. I wanted this to be kind of like a way of showing you what a QTEL lesson looks like, how it's structured. It's really based on cultural learning. And so I just think that the structure of it is just so powerful. And so I was hoping this would be kind of the tool for you guys to kind of get a sense of it. So all of the slides that are dark blue here are really just for you. They're just like your little professional development built in, right? So it talks a little bit about, like down here in the chat, you can see, it was mostly taken. I added some things, but slowly but surely we had been adding some. There were the request to be as much as possible to use some of the books that came in the last adoption. You should have it, or your school should have it if you particularly don't have it in your offices or in your spaces. So those are kind of like some of the resources that we're trying to bring back, since this is something that schools should have access to. Rachel Rachel is here. Rachel shared with us a lesson that she and her co-teacher piloted from the new adoption, some ideas and some things. So given that we're moving that way, hopefully. So Rachel is going to be sharing with us a little bit of that. And let me get to that part. Here we go.
Are you going to share the slides, Ellie?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So I basically followed the model that Ellie had created with the Now and put together a couple of lessons around one of our newcomer books and a curriculum that I've used with first grade because it connects to their community unit. You'll notice that I've listed the book title and where it is in the adoption kit, but there's also a video embedded in case you don't actually have the books nearby or we're always on the run, right? I also put together a folder of resources that are embedded within the lessons. I've, for one of the books, I translated using Canva into multiple languages. So I know that for some of our communities, like finding Pashto resources are difficult to find. So I just really want to encourage you, and I'd be willing to do like a teaching session around using Canva. Of course, I don't speak or read Pashto, so I don't know if the quality of the translation is any good. But I do suggest that you go in and look to see what resources are available to you and how to use that. So Within that, I used Canva to create these cards, which I didn't translate, but to incorporate TPR. I also use these visual cards with my newcomers to do charades. They like to do the actions. And there's the linked video. We can just skip on through. Using Ellie's template, I put together the content and language objectives and trying to make connections to their home country and home lives and their who they are as a person.
And just to add to this part, if for those ELD teachers teaching already in a dual language program or school, this is something like you do constantly, I think, to have your language objectives and your cultural objectives. And so this is not only restrictive to dual language, but I think it's best practices. And so we are growing into that part.
And so for these, I have just our anticipatory set, and I've also created some sample sentence frames for you to go ahead and use. And I have something that's called a sentence, the map, like the questions to have the dialogue. If you go on forward, I think you'll see that. Skip. Those are some of the actions that they can connect in the book. But like to have them practice the vocabulary in a small group situation to answer and ask the questions, you can print that off and have that with them after they've done some practice and of reading the book. And then I created this chart where they could go ahead and interview and do some smiley faces and to practice our pronouns and our sentence frames, again, with those actions. And you can have those cards available to them. So it's basically taking one book and you can delve into it and maybe have 4 different lessons. I don't know how often you're working with your newcomers, but that's how I envisioned it. And I've also linked within the original slide deck, the links to view these documents within Canva. So you can make a copy of them and you can modify them in the way that fits the needs of your students, their ages, and so forth. So that's all are welcome here. How many of you are familiar with that book or use that book already? A few of you. I like it, you know. And then for the next unit was the community unit, and I've set it up in a similar way. I didn't translate this into multiple copies. I just did a Spanish and an English. And so I like using this in small group instruction. We do compare and contrast of the illustration with the actual photo of the place and have a conversation around different places within our community and expand their vocabulary. I start, if you want to go ahead, Ellie, with this is the learning target for the first grade social studies unit. And again, our objectives, making connections between here and now. I usually take a Google Earth capture of the neighborhood around the school and have a conversation about where we are within our school, because we know our students are coming from lots of different transition points in their life. And so this is a good way to expand some of our vocabulary around things that they're recognizing on the daily, either from walking to school or riding the bus. I created or modified these cards again. So I just cut and paste and on top as a layer inside my Google slide. So you'll make, if you want to use this unit, make a copy of the slide deck, put in your school, do a little cut and paste to some of those place cards on top. So because in this unit, they also make maps. I see your comment there, Jenny. So they're making maps throughout it. So it's kind of doing some pre-teaching, like how do we understand a map? Where is our neighborhood? Where's our school? We can point out things like the baseball field, which maybe they've never had anybody be explicit with them about, like this is where we're playing kickball. Here's our track. If it's a real newcomer, they won't necessarily know those languages, that language, and they can mark it up themselves if you print it out for them. some more sentence frames. And then this is to help prepare them between the book, after you've been reading the book at least once, to the actual places. Now, when I've done this with some of my students, you know, I have a student, I think that there's a picture of a very famous market in Guatemala there. She's like, oh, that's my country. Like, you know, she's a first grader. She probably doesn't actually remember being there. She's probably never been to that market, but it was really great for her to feel like that was a reflection of her culture, even though she didn't have the personal experience of it. So if you want to continue, Ellie. There's the video in case you don't have access to the book. The first grade teachers don't have that. That is in our book set, I think. And this, I made several sentence frames. So the activity for them to do is to draw a view outside their window. There's one with just a simple sentence frame, I see, but outside my window, I see, I watch, I hear, are things that are refrains throughout the book. And then I also, you know, chose a couple of different covers where the kids can then do kind of a flap up. So, you know, they have the cover of the outside of the window, and then you would start looking at the interior view. So that's one of the options. There's another option where the students in the worksheets can go ahead and they can do a drawing of from their house today and compare that to their home in a previous time. So for example, I may do a drawing of my house today and then take a picture of a house that I'd lived at in the past. Maybe when I was living in Vietnam, I would put that on the bottom as my model so that the students could feel like some affirmation. It could be drawings of both too, if you wanted to extend it that way. Again, the links to the Canva documents are inside the folder, so you can click on them and make a copy. If any of the links don't work, let me know. I'll try to figure it out, because the whole sharing through Canva is kind of new for me too. So those are a couple of units.
Thank you, Rachel. It's great to it's great to see all these ideas in I totally see how the juices are flowing now. People thinking like, oh, I can do this, I can do that. So even though this is like with a lower primary grades, you can also, you know, tweak it a little bit and be able to use it with the upper 4, 5, 4 and 5th graders. So muchas gracias, Rachel. And there has been also like a few other resources added to the slide deck. There's a little short video on how, like a refresher, or if you're doing, you know, with your co-teachers, supporting the staff, how to use wordless books to support oracy development and so on. So those are there for you to explore. There are also some other resources, and let's see, Molly, are you still around? No la veo. All right. Well, there are some other resources that also Molly Anderson contributed to our slide deck. So there, at some point, you're welcome to explore and paint with a picture with words using an app, and so that would be also for you available. Couple of other lessons there with sentence frames, and you also have access to a link in the notes where some of these resources or printouts that you can have access. So this is a teamwork really, and we really appreciate that it's a team effort to be able to collaborate with others across the district and to support our students. So we really appreciate that. And it looks like secondary are back. So.
Hi, everyone. Hey, I think we're doing okay on time. I think we might even be able to give you time to do the feedback form at the end without going into overtime. Let me share my screen again. Is it possible? Are we really okay on time, Carol, or am I just kidding myself?
No, you're doing great. I actually was going to tell Ellie she had more time, but it's also great to get feedback on the feedback form in case, I'll keep a copy of the chat transcript, but it's always good to have those questions in the feedback form too.
All right. Is this our, no, we have summer school too. No, we are just down to the wire. Okay, I think we'll be all right. Okay, quick Lexia English update. We did do the survey and I was looking at it like I thought I just kind of ran the data for it. So 33 people responded. 75% were elementary, and 60% said it was worth the time and effort to get started. When I was looking at the other parts, I realized I had a really bad scaling system because I started with one being they love it, and then the next one is rate the level of engagement, and one was none. So lesson learned. But anyway, kind of some mixed feedback, which I think is kind of interesting because even with the language arts adoption, if I heard right, my understanding is it was about half the people wanted one and half the people wanted other, it's and then we're a really big district and we have variety of needs. So kind of interesting world we live in. So anyway, yeah, so looks like not very many loved it. Kind of most are kind of in the middle, okay. If you haven't filled out this survey, you can. We will give you a more in-depth one. And if you have suggestions for the things you want us to ask so that you could really express yourself, that would be super. Just email me any of your ideas. We will do one more towards the end. I did this initially because I wasn't sure if the adoption committee would want the feedback sooner than later. So I just wanted to be prepared. And then as far as the level of engagement for students, kind of a mixed result there also. And for the progress that it seemed like your students were making for the people that filled out the survey, again, mixed results, more in the middle. Hard to measure anyway. It's it is one of those things that we're using it for such a short period of time that it's kind of hard to tell, but yeah, so if any of you want to give me more feedback. Oh, just to give you the rundown for middle schools, just to pull it out. It was pretty similar. So, a couple of people were just getting started. 3 people thought it was worth the effort. 1 person thought not. So for what it's worth, that's what we know about Lexia English at this time. I hope you all are using the data yourselves. And I'd be curious to get a little feedback on the lessons that you give to the students on your own. Because I looked at them and I was like, didn't look very inspiring, but I don't have kids in front of me, so I think I'm going to leave it at that. If you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat, but I'm going to go to the next. Yes, Devin, I agree that there should be more open-ended opportunities for feedback. Good idea. Awesome. Oh, Chris, I don't know the answer to that question. Toshiko, do you see Chris's question? What does this mean going forward with Lexia? We'll have it until June 30th. That's all I know. We did get some information about maybe getting it for the summer, but I don't know where we're at for that. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, what is the question?
Just what does this mean going forward for Lexia?
Oh, yeah, we can talk about it today. We have a language arts adoption meeting today, Chris. But we are looking at, the reason we're piloting it is to see for tier 2 interventions, if this is something that we want. It just seems like the feedback is very mixed. So we might have to, decide as a group how we're going to move forward with Lexia English, but yeah, continue to pilot it. And we'll see how we can fold that into our adoption. Supplemental.
We keep bookshelf. Oh, okay, I see. A couple other adoption questions. Jen, just the comment with the classroom teachers, and again, I don't, I'm not sure how it's working. I think there's some scheduling issues and how we co-teach in schools that have a few, fewer English language learners. Because I know that some places because it's with newcomers that they're pulling kids to use it as opposed to having it be a language arts teacher's thing because they have to speak into it. So I think there's just like a lot of mixture of how it's even being implemented because there's so many different scenarios in different schools. That's my feeling. Okay, well, I'm going to. Thank you, Marjorie. All right, so we're going to go on to summer school, and Andy's going to talk to you about that.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you all, and thanks, Betsy, for organizing us today. So this is, I guess the best way to describe it is the MLD Summer Programs landing page in the form of a Google slide. But before we talk about MLD, you all should know by now that the district is offering its kind of usual summer programs: elementary Camp Achieve, a middle school program, and high school credit recovery. And so I can't really speak too much on that because our wheelhouse is really the MLD summer programs. But let me just say that if you are all involved in summer school, in particular in identifying which students to invite to your school's summer school program, of course, we want to have our English learners and our students in the migrant education program really be priorities because summer is such an important opportunity for them to make up any missed targets and accelerate if possible. Hey, Betsy, is it okay if I share my screen?
Yep. Can you bump me? Or I'll stop. How do I
Yeah.
unshare? It's been too long.
I'll just click it. I think
Yeah,
I
just
got
bump me.
Okay, there it goes. Can everyone see that? Okay, so those are the district programs, and every school should have a site coordinator. And so if you don't know anything about your school's summer school program, reach out to your site coordinator and again, encourage them to invite our English learners and students in the migrant ed program. Now let's talk at the supplemental summer programs that the MLD is offering. So these links, this first link is the overview document, and this brings you to this page. It's still a work in progress, but most of it is locked in. So a reminder, or for those of you that are new, our MLD summer programs are supplemental, meaning that they are funded by grants and they can't really compete with other programs. In other words, our English learners, our students in the migrant ed program first need the opportunity to attend the regular district summer programs, and then as an additional opportunity can attend the MLD summer programs. So this sheet is available to all of you, and I'll go through them very quickly. We have an American Indian Alaska Native Lifeways camp. That's the last week of June. This year, we have a somewhat of a reduced budget, and so we're really trying to prioritize where should we deploy our resources to support the greatest need areas. And one decision we made is that there are going to be 4 elementary sites or I should say schools, they could be at hub sites, that are going to be getting 4 ELD co-teachers to co-teach with classroom teachers. And the same model at middle school. So there are going to be 4 middle school ELD teachers co-teaching in middle schools. Ideally, we'd have a co-teacher at every school. We just don't have the resources to do that. So we're really prioritizing the schools with the highest number of English learners. We are offering a FYI, I know this is K-8, but we are offering a focused ELD course at the high school level. Now, this next section of green programs, this is our Migrant Summer Academy. So we are engaging students at all levels, pre-K, elementary, middle, and high school at Aloha Huber Park in the afternoon. Now, we are still working on the times because, as some of you may know, the district got a grant a few weeks ago, which extended the district summer programs till 1 or 2 in the afternoon, which starts to cross over with our migrant program. So we hope to have an answer soon about exactly when these programs will be offered. And then finally at the bottom, we have an elementary, middle, and high school newcomer program. And so these are only for students that are currently in the newcomer centers. And so these are invitation only, and Gloria is leading that. Those will take place at the same time as the district programs taking place. So those are the programs, a summary of them. You feel free to go into this document and read more about what is the program focus, who are the students. There's a lot of nuts and bolts stuff in here. If you see something in red, it means it's still TBD. Okay, back to the presentation here. This is what I want to spend even more time on, the staff application. Thanks to those of you that have applied, and thanks to those of you who have served in summer school in the past. You know, it's such an important opportunity, and we and the students greatly appreciate your commitment and spending time with students this summer. Such a meaningful experience. I'm trying not to sell it too hard because I don't, we want to recruit you. It's going to be a great opportunity. It's 15 days. All of our programs are 15 days long, except for the American Indian Alaska Native one. So they more or less parallel the district's summer programs. So if you click on this link, you will get to the summer school application. And so in this, at the top of the application, there's a brief summary of each of the programs that we are offering, and just a few simple questions if you are interested in applying. Now, if you apply, it doesn't mean you're committing to it at this point. We'll look at your application, and then we will let you know if we are offering you a position. You'll get an email from me. But please take a look at these opportunities, and we encourage you to apply. Again, a great opportunity to support students this summer. If you have any questions, you can reach out directly to me or to any of the coordinators or contact people that are listed in this overview. Column J is the contact person, and we have all the people listed here. If you have questions about, well, what are the hours? Is there prep time included? What site do you think this will be at? All those nuts and bolts kind of questions, you can reach out directly to them. And so that's it for summer school. Thanks so much for listening, and thank you in advance if you do apply for our program and for supporting our students. Thanks, Betsy.
Yep. You want to just share? We have one slide left. You want
Oh,
to
yeah,
just...
sure.
And the exit ticket. It's time to do an exit ticket. So if you all wouldn't mind doing that. And then just I'm seeing all the notes on Lexia. And one of the things that it also occurs to me is that, like, we have middle school and elementary school in here, and middle school doesn't have an adoption that's happening. Our adoption is not until next year. So we may need to do some separate conversations. And I'm just curious, like, because it's like overarchingly that in the chat, it sounds like it's been not a good experience. But I'm wondering, because that data indicated that there were a lot of teachers that did seem to think so. So I'm curious to find out what that is. So it's an interesting, but that's what a pilot's for. So thank you for all your feedback.
Yeah, that is very interesting data. So thank you for sharing that perspective as well. Are we at the end, Betsy? I just wanted to. Yeah, we are. I just wanted to go back to the, since we have some time, I wanted to go back to that staff on slide 10, how schools were staffed. I tried to answer a lot of the questions, but what I failed to put on this slide is that we did overall, even though some of you might see some decreases in allocation, overall, the district has made an additional 1.5 million investment for EL staffing. And so it's a huge, huge step in the right direction. And that's a huge addition to our budget, which is great. And we will make sure that, oh, and the one thing I also forgot to mention here is that EL staffing, I think you remember, always lived with the multilingual department, and we would make those adjustments here as new students came in, or as there were adjustments to enrollment. Now all EL staffing has been moved to the SAM committee, or the SAM team, which is their staffing allocation model that adjusts for all classroom teachers and at the beginning of the year, which is great, because if there are any additions to school enrollments, those will be adjusted automatically through that team. And then schools with higher numbers than originally projected would receive more teachers, versus having a fixed number of teachers to work with, which is how we've been staffed previously. All right, just wanted to make sure to include that information. And then, yeah, was there anything else, any other outstanding? Well, if there are any questions that we didn't get to, we'll make sure to add them to your to the document, the question document, and then share that with you.
And so just as a side note, so please do take the time to look at the exit, do the exit ticket. Now you got 3 minutes. And then there's the question document for the June. So the questions, right after there's the questions, and there is already one set up for June. So you can add some questions that we could respond to at that meeting. There is an adoption question on there, Marcella and Toshiko. You're welcome to stick around. I think there's a few questions, or if you want to take off your speaker and chat with us, that's cool.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
try to
feel kind
answer some of the questions too here. I
I
think what would be a great idea is to save some of the questions, and we can put it in like our Q&A later. But questions around paraeducator support, we're going to be providing a lot of training for the paraeducators, as well as how schools would be able to utilize their expertise. So that will be coming. Hopefully that will answer some of your questions here.
So the meeting is officially over. You're welcome to cut out, but please do those things. And if you want to stick around, please do. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. And we have one last meeting in June. Take care all. Thank you. Hey team, I'm not able, for some reason, I'm not able to, and you can stop recording, but I am not able to save this chat for some reason.
Was it maybe because Carol, did you, or no, who opened the Zoom to begin?
I opened it, but I gave,
I think
Carol-
I can save the chat. I think it'll save, but because I was recording, I feel like it'll give me the chat transcript too. Or we might be able to find it in your Zoom, like in your Zoom history. If it doesn't download online, I'll let you know.
Okay, so when we close out, because you were, and I think you're still recording, if
Oh,
we
I thought I pushed